Alright guys, sorry about all the technical difficulty. I thought I had it set up yesterday properly to make it from an event into a live stream, but I had a little bit of difficulty there, sorry. So I'm just going to enter into my video on my iPad so that I can see all of your comments. So hold on one second. All right, there we go. Let me just turn down the volume so I don't hear myself. All right, so can you guys see everything all right? Does it look good for you guys? So definitely excuse the technical difficulty. They will get better. All right, so before we kind of start, does anyone, or do you guys want to comment maybe where you guys are tuning in from? I'm very curious to see. And it's so weird because it's like just my hands, but that should be okay. So let's see here. Yay, so good to see you guys. I'm so glad you guys can make it. Here in San Diego, it's, around 5 p.m. Oh, we got some Vegas, some New York. So I know it's a little late in some places. Trinidad, oh my gosh. What time is it in Trinidad? I do wonder. LA, cool. California, Texas, South Africa, what? That's so cool. I'm so excited that you guys could all join. So here you can kind of see, I have, if you guys are subscribed to my newsletter, you would have gotten these, but if you aren't, I'm going to put in the description after this whole live session a link where you can join my newsletter, and then I'll send you all these documents which you can print out yourself. But basically what I wanted to kind of start out with is some drills first. So I kind of made it to where these are a little bit opaque so that you can kind of actually use your cone to practice over them if you wanted to. And but if you don't, no worries. So I also have here, I wanted to show you guys, you can practice on these, which I know Henna Caravan and Henna Souk sell. So these are really fun to practice on, but if you don't have them, you can use just like plain paper too, like just white or colored paper. And if you saw my last video, I showed you guys how you can make this hand. And I also have like the PDF, which you can print out too. But again, you can also use plain paper as well. So I hope you guys have some stuff with you ready to go. So I have my henna cones here, you can see. If you guys want to see maybe like a cone rolling and filling kind of live session, that's definitely something I was thinking might be kind of fun. You guys let me know. But let's see. All right, so the first thing I kind of want to go over are these, like I said, the henna drills. And so like I said, if you have it printed out, you can just go directly onto it, but not to worry, I'm actually going to practice it on here. So doing drills, it's really nice to just use plain paper, I think. And let's see. Oh yeah, so I'm so glad you guys are having a good time. I'm glad you guys can make it. Okay, yes, so some of you guys want to see how to make cones too. I'll definitely do that live maybe next week, and hopefully you won't have so much technical difficulty. But anyhow, so I have some tissue here. I'm just gonna kind of release some of the paste. I like to do that first, just to kind of make sure everything's flowing smoothly. And okay, so the first one is kind of like this little swirl with some flames on it. And yeah, so basically I'm gonna show you first how I do this one, and just definitely practice along with me. I think that would be awesome. So the first thing I like to do is I take a swirl. I start with the left side first. That's just easier for me. And so the trick with this, because you can kind of see how it's thin first and then it gradually gets thicker, that is done with slightly more pressure. But you want to be careful not to do too much more pressure, because then it'll just come out super, super thick. And then when you do, so I'm going thicker, 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 and then right here is practically almost no pressure. And then I use a flick of the wrist and I make that swirl go inside like that with a nice pointed tip. And I hope you guys can see that all right. I know it's a little bit farther away. I might try to just adjust it just a tad so it's closer. Let's see here. Yeah, I think that's better. Better to see. Okay. So now that you have your little swirls, it kind of looks like the Taurus symbol. If you guys are into astrology, you might know. But let's see. Okay, good. Yeah. So closer is better. I'm just looking at the comments real quick. You flip the camera so you can see the signs from your point of view. Okay. Okay, I see. So it's flipped the opposite way. Let me just flip it around. So I have my camera up here, and so it's a little bit difficult to see. Okay, yeah, that's probably better. That is probably so much better, actually. Thank you guys for mentioning that. Okay, so again, like I said, once you have the two swirls here, I'm gonna start by going to the left side again, and then you can go as slow or as fast as you need to. This is actually a little bit, slower than I'm used to doing it, but I think that'll help you to see how I'm doing it a little bit better. And then before I go to the center, I'm actually gonna go, I kind of start opposite to opposite. So I do one side first and then the other. And one side's gonna feel a lot easier. So don't worry, like one of them looks a little wonky. That'll definitely take practice. And let's see, and then I do the other one, and then I like to make it about like as if you're kind of making a petal, like almost like that. So I work in that kind of direction. So this is kind of to show you a little guide of how it goes. So in order to make sure that you don't go too far, you can always do that too. And then the other side, let's see. You're not in focus. So I'm looking at it on my iPad. It looks focused to me. I'm not sure, it could be the connection possibly. That was one thing I was kind of wondering about using my iPhone. But you guys let me know if it's not in focus or the camera is on the paper. Let's see. Okay, maybe I might try to do it because I do have light so that everything is illuminated, so that might have a reflection on it. Okay, so some say it is in focus. So possibly there might be a way to go into the settings on the video that's going on right now and maybe trying to make the resolution better. But okay, so now for the part that makes this one look really, really cool. So basically it's kind of like you're doing the same thing, but go towards the center here, and then the same thing on the other side. All right, so you can kind of see how it follows the trajectory of a petal. And these are just really some little ends that you can do on your designs, or even on a finger, like if you do a little bit smaller, or at the end of, say, like something like this would look really cool going the other way on the hand or the finger like this. All right, let's see here. Okay, so that's the first one. And like I said, if you have plain paper, that is definitely easier to kind of practice multiple, because that's one thing I also recommend is if you want to get something down and have it basically kind of master it, you're gonna wanna have to practice it many, many times. And so the best way to do that is to just take some time, maybe like 20 minutes or so every day, or at least every other day, and just sit down with a cone, and you're going to want to practice these drills. And like I said, you can just use paper, you can use an acrylic hand, just anything. You can use your own body, of course. But yes, so let me know, are all of you guys have henna? Do all of you have henna with you that you're kind of practicing with alongside? I hope so, because it's so much more fun to do henna than to see someone do henna. So let's see, I'm gonna do one more and then we're gonna move on to the next one. And if you guys have any questions, I'm going to kind of glance over there soon. So I think if you can master something like this, you can easily kind of adapt this into your own style and find many ways to kind of utilize this little design. So I kind of call these, again, if you guys are showing up just now, these are like little henna drills. And again, I'll send these to you if you're not already on my newsletter. Just check the description after this video. All right, so the next one is this one right here. This one I use literally all the time. This is like one of the, like my go-tos. And so if you get this down, it's literally the best. So first, and that's another thing too. So the reason I did this one going one way and this one going the other is because you're gonna wanna practice doing the swirl in both directions. Because for me, doing it this way is actually a little bit harder than the other way. So this is the swirls going to the left-hand side, and I always start from the bottom first, and then I work my way up like that. And then now for the leaves, this part, let's see. I always have trouble with this because my lizard brain doesn't want to waste henna. Trouble with practicing with henna on paper. Yeah, I know sometimes it can be a little bit like, maybe I should be using this on skin, you know, to actually get the benefit of it. But I do have to say that the one way that you're going to get, you know, much better, definitely a lot faster, is if you just kind of practice like this, either on paper or your acrylic hand. Because, you know, what you could do also is, I know a lot of people make henna and then sometimes we'll use a cone a little bit here and then put in the freezer and a little bit there. And, you know, those cones, after a couple times freezing and refreezing, you're probably not going to want to use that on like a paying person. So you can definitely take those cones and reuse those as like your practice cones. Why is the camera recording your desk? I don't know if it's cut off, but it's recording the whole thing from my view. Maybe it's the way you have your phone turned, I'm not sure. But let's see what else. Yes, okay. So again, with the swirl, you go really light pressure and then thicker pressure, and then now this is practically almost no pressure that I'm using. So then I'm just guiding that swirl to a final kind of tip right there. I really like to make these sharp, and that can be the challenging part. So you're gonna wanna practice. You can even practice just the swirl part over and over again until you get it down, because doing a graceful swirl will add so much spice to your designs. I use it all the time. And then for these leaves, so you can also just kind of drape it and then go thicker. I usually go like that first, and then I'll start from the bottom and then I'll connect it to the top. So that is definitely the easiest way for me to do it. But you can also, for example, might be easier to do the leaf and then go from the top to the bottom, which that's totally an option too. But I think you get a cleaner look if you do it in a separate kind of action. Let's see. All right, so that is the second drill. Hopefully that one's fun for you guys. And now the next one I'm going to do is this one, another one that I do like literally all over the place. If you look at any of the designs on my Instagram, I utilize this motif so much. I don't know, I just think it's so graceful, and it just really adds like a lot of life to your designs. All right, and again, we're going to be doing that swirl motif, which actually I might do it like that so you can kind of see what I'm doing. All right, so now we're going the opposite way. So like I said, one way is gonna feel much easier than the other. So now this one, the swirl is going to the right-hand side. And one thing I'm curious, are any of you guys lefties? I know there's some lefty henna artists out there, so I don't know if any of you guys are one of them, but I'm definitely right-handed, so I know things are a little bit different if you are lefty, possibly. But again, okay, so for these, what you want to do is you want to make sure that there's enough space in between them. So when you start, you want to make sure that you clear the pathway, but you also want to make sure that you don't go too crazy and go like over there. I mean, it doesn't look bad per se, but we're going for the look that's like, you know, this is kind of what we're trying to avoid, and we want to try to make sure that the trajectory of those leaves are kind of going in a similar fashion. So it kind of creates this nice, graceful flow. So I know that that can be sometimes the challenging part, so I always start the swirl and then I go up and just gradual like that. And see, this one you can also kind of vary it up and make it have more of a intense swirl on the top, and then follow up with the second set of leaves, kind of same as how we did there. So that's the cool thing, is everyone kind of has their own style, their own variations. Ooh, we do got one lefty, that's awesome. Awesome, so hopefully it's not, I don't know, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's like the same thing, but you know, what's easier maybe for a righty is harder for a lefty, and vice versa. But yeah, I was just curious, so that's awesome. All right, so we'll kind of do one more like that. Go like that. And again, going from the thin to the thick is definitely the challenge. So I don't know if any of you guys have been to HennaCon, but I went in 2017, I believe. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Victoria from Blurberry Buzz, but she does a really awesome class, and you know, she talks about, I think they call them the slugs. So you go like thin and then to thick and then to thin again. So that is definitely a good way to practice that concept of going thin and then thicker, 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 and then thinner, thinner, thinner. So doing kind of a gradual motion, because basically that's all that this is that, but just in a curved form. So once you're able to master going from thick to thin in a very graceful motion, you can easily transfer that pressure, that kind of, it's more like a muscle memory of knowing when to lighten up and when to add more pressure. And then it's, once you have the muscle memory down, then you can make things go in whatever direction you want, because that's all you're focusing on then at that point, is where do you want the direction to go. But your brain is already kind of automatic. It knows how to do thin, thick, and thin. Let's see. All right. So, like I said, if there's any questions, definitely let me know. All right, so now let's see, we got, okay, this one that we're going to do. Let me see here. So these little teardrops are definitely very common. You'll see them in a myriad of different designs. And I think these are probably a little bit easier than doing the pointed tips. So basically, and then another thing too I want to show you, because as you work, the pressure releases in your cone. You kind of see it's definitely a little bit more floppy. So I want to take this time to kind of show you how I hold the cone. So basically, once it starts to lose pressure, I usually flip it over kind of like that, so that it rests easily in the palm of my hand, this part here. This is a rather large cone, so it does that pretty easily. But it's the same concept even if you have a small cone. And then when what I'm basically doing in order to release the pressure is I'm squeezing just a little bit here. So it kind of goes like that. So I'm squeezing kind of with my thumb, if that makes sense. So squeezing, squeezing. So this is one way. I know this is kind of like a unique way. A lot of people tend to hold it like this, which definitely works too. But if you want to try like a different method, this is the method I do, and a lot of people ask me how I work really, really fast, and I think this has partly to do with that. So folding it over like that definitely helps me work. So now we're going to move on to these little teardrops. So again, I start with the left-hand side. It's a little bit easier. So first you can do like a thick dot, and with very light pressure, kind of go down to the point that you're wanting to make. So usually the teardrop is kind of going either left or right. So we do the one that's going down to the right hand side first, and then opposite to, do that thick dot first, and then with hardly any pressure, you can teardrop it down. So this is going to definitely, you know, sorry, I was looking at the comments and I kind of got distracted. Okay, so yes. So at first, doing the dot is definitely useful, but then eventually you can just drag it and drop. Drag and drop first. And then that can definitely, you'll develop the muscle memory. And so that's the second set, and the third set kind of looks almost like a heart. And then this part you can do a dot first, and then you can drag the tip to make a point. That makes sense. And then eventually, once you have it down, so this is, for me, I'm kind of slowing it down and kind of showing you different methods when you're first starting, because usually figuring out how to hold the cone and then do pressure simultaneously can be a little bit challenging, but I'll kind of show you how I would do it at normal speed. So I would go teardrop, 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 and then like that. Sorry, that's kind of in the way, so let me do it one more time. So go teardrop, teardrop, and then the heart, and then the point at the top. So these just look really, really cute. I think they look really good on the fingers. And let's see, now I'm looking at the questions. Okay, yes, so I'm definitely going to add everything at the end. If you guys are just joining, I did have a little cool difficulty, so I couldn't broadcast from the event that I created with the original descriptions and everything like that. Once this is over, I'm gonna add all that information into the description of this live video. So don't worry, it'll be there for you guys, because I definitely want you to have these. All right, so moving on again. Okay, how long did it take you to perfect this in your design? So I've been doing henna for about 7 years now, and pretty nonstop. So as soon as I started, I kind of just never put a cone down. So like literally every day I was practicing on myself, on friends, family, paper. Didn't have an acrylic hand like this for like years. So don't worry if you don't have one of those, you can practice and excel no matter what you have. All right, so now I want to move on. So practicing these, it's kind of like the same concept, but just in drill fashion. What you can do is you can actually lay down a line. And so I don't know if any of you guys, how many of you are familiar with draping, but basically that is a technique where you say you start from going to point A to point B, you're going to be in the air. So the only time that your cone is touching is point A and then point B. So you're kind of laying it down in the air, and if it breaks, that's okay. You just can kind of retouch it up. So draping is another technique that you're going to want to master. And it's a good way to kind of practice this, because usually you see these a lot in vines, and the vine usually is a straight or curved line where you drape it first. So if you have a line, you can start by draping the line and then doing your teardrops. And so again, like I said, if going in a teardrop form is difficult at first, you can do a really big dot first, and then using your cone with a light pressure, you can kind of draw out that teardrop shape. But I think it's more ideal to kind of develop your muscle memory of just doing it consistently and fluidly, being able to make that teardrop. So you start with a lot of pressure without moving, and then you slowly move down towards where you're trying to drop that tip of the teardrop. So there is that. And okay, now I'm looking at the comments. Have you ever worked with henna cones that are really difficult to work with? I have one that has a hard time getting the paste to come out. So first things first, what kind of cone is it? Is it one from like an Indian grocery store or eBay? Because those ones usually are, not only do they have really weird stuff in them that you shouldn't use, but usually they are really, really old. So they've literally probably been sitting on a shelf for years, and so they can be really dry up and really bad consistency. So I would definitely say to make it yourself, or buy it from a supplier or a henna artist that makes it themselves, because you're gonna get the best quality paste, and good quality paste equals good quality work. If you have really bad quality of consistency of henna paste, your work's gonna reflect that. Let's see, draping has never worked for me. It might be so thick that when I start draping, so that's not. So inside here is Rajasthani henna powder. So the videos on my YouTube, although my recipe is using Rajasthani henna, and I would love to do a live video on that as well. But basically Rajasthani henna is great for draping. If you're using Jamila, that is definitely going to be thicker and more maybe for like florals, really thick, bold designs. So I would definitely recommend using Rajasthani or a mix of Rajasthani and Jamila together. So that's the thing, all henna powders are not equal. Some are going to be more stringy, which that's what Rajasthani is known for. And when you have stringy henna, that makes draping lines so much easier. So that is that. Yes, good paste equals good henna designs, exactly. So I hope that, you know, maybe while I'm talking and not doing henna, that hopefully you guys are still practicing what I kind of started, because I'm definitely going off on tangents, and I apologize about that. But now moving on to this one. So this is basically kind of like the same thing as that, but usually I work in the opposite direction. So for the teardrops, I start from the teardrop point and go down. For these, I actually start from the base and then I go outwards like that. But you can easily take any of these and you can make it into one of these just by adding a tip. You can add a tip with your cone like that and do the same thing. But personally, I like to go from point A, the line that you're working from, and then going outwards. So that is how I like to do them. And again, it's the same concept as we've been working this whole time, doing that thin to thick motion. And like I said, don't worry, it will come with time and you will be able to do it with ease. But definitely in the beginning, don't worry about how fast you work. Just you want to make sure you're getting the everything right, the techniques down. Speed will come, basically. Don't worry, speed comes with time. Does elastic and smooth henna work with draping too? I think if you're talking about henna treasures, I think they kind of using that terminology for their henna products. Like elastic henna is definitely, elastic means yes, so being able to drape without it breaking. Because if you are using a more thick or creamy type of henna, when you're draping, it'll probably break a bunch of times and then you'll have to like refill it in. So that's, yeah, so elastic and the smooth one, from what I've seen, also, I think you'd be able to drape with that too. So the arm hair. So if there is arm hair, because usually the draping is going on, you know, usually the top of the hands or like the inside of the arm, you can usually drape pretty well. But yes, if you have a client that has a lot of arm hair, you're not going to be able to do draping. You're going to have to work very flush to the skin. So with that, you're going to have a lot of confidence in your lines to just be able to go straight from point A to point B. So that will take time, and at my outdoor booth, I do henna a lot on males, as well as like, you know, women who don't shave their arms, because usually for bridal, the brides will kind of get waxed, and so you have a perfect smooth surface to work on. But especially when you're doing festivals, you don't always have that, and so that will come with practice too. I think I've done henna through hair enough that I can still pretty good with it, but so don't worry. If someone does have long hair, if it's a male though, I'll usually say I can't do it on the top of your arm. Like I have to do it somewhere where there's not a lot of hair. And thank you so much. The nails are very grown out, but don't hate on me because we are on lockdown after all. I practice on my husband. You know, my husband has not let me practice on him, so you are very lucky. Let's see. Does anyone else problem with taking out the henna from the freezer? So if you do have a problem with the oil in the freezer, what you can do, a lot of times you have to like reincorporate the oil back into the cone by kind of creating this motion up and down the cone. That will definitely help kind of reintegrate the oil back into the paste. And then a lot of times what you'll want to do if you have a problem like that, just squeeze out a lot of the paste first until you get kind of that smooth texture again. So I think every cone is salvageable for the most part if it's like handmade. Let's see, I would say Rajasthani is notorious. So there's many different types of Rajasthani henna. Some are gonna be more stringy than the other. But in general, as a rule, most Rajasthanis you're gonna be able to work with just fine for draping. They are not press on actually. They look like it just because they're so grown out. But all right, so now we're gonna go on to this right here. So the swirls can be a little bit challenging, I think, in the beginning too. But you know, some people start from the center and then work out like that. But I think it's a little bit easier to start with the general circumference or the size that you're going for and then working inwards. And that way you're able to follow the circumference and make sure that the size and the flow is correct. So that is how I do the swirls. And a lot of times, you know, you can add like a nice little dot in the center that looks pretty good too. But you know, if you want to vary things up, give it a different look, you can make the inside really thin and come to a really gradual and fine point too. So there's definitely options that you can do. Let's see. So definitely practice those, I would say a couple more times. I love doing swirls and they definitely create the foundation for many different designs, from flowers to, you know, mandalas like that. So the swirls are really, really good. All right, so I'm pretty sure you guys are definitely getting warmed up now. I know I am. So now moving on to some really fun ones, the paisley shape. So this can be very challenging to master too in the beginning. And the way I like to do it is I actually start with this S curve first and then gradually meet up with a gradual C curve. So I start from the bottom and then it's kind of like a very gradual S curve. And then I'm just creating a dot there. And then I go from the bottom and I connect it up gradually. This is kind of like the neck of the paisley. And so that is how I do my paisley shape for the most part. And then you've probably seen also I do this one where instead of forming this little kind of swirl at the end here, I'll actually kind of make it like it's a cutoff one. Because then you can kind of use the concepts that we've been working with up here to actually join it. And then you can create some variety like that. And you can practice them small and big because these you can also use on fingers too. So being able to do them really, really big as well as small will be very useful to you when you're creating designs. And smaller cones, yes. So I think also, yeah, in the beginning, working with smaller cones is easier. I personally have been using like large cones for a really long time. And so I mentioned kind of earlier too that I like to flip it over once the pressure releases. So then you create the sensation of a fresh, fully taut cone as well. So I fold it over like this and I hold it inside my hand like that. And I actually usually have these two hands on one side holding with my ring finger on the other side. And then I'm just gradually squeezing let me see if I can show you this part here. So this part that is folded, I just squeeze here to release pressure. And I think this has saved my hands because when I work like this, I don't have to use much pressure at all. Like I'm hardly using any pressure to get thick lines. But that's also because I also make my paste a little bit more on the thin side, so it glides out easy. So I've never had any issues with hand problems. So if you have excess oil coming up from the cone, try maybe using more tape. And also I find that if you roll cones from a rectangle versus a triangle, there's more henna cone material rolled up into it so that you have less leakages. But also just honestly just use a ton of tape, I tell you. All right. Okay, so moving on to the chains, these ones here. I love these ones. If you follow me at all on any social media platform, you'll see that I use these all the time. So again, to start, well, we can start with a nice draped line. Again, if it does break, no problem there. And this is definitely one that does well for draping if you're able to. So, but we are doing more of a curve shape, so it can be challenging. So you want to be a little bit steady, but you don't want to move too slow. You want to be a little bit concise in your movements. So you can make some little kind of half ovals, and you can do different shapes too. And a lot of times I'll even kind of add another layer. And you can even do kind of some layers like that. So chains are really fun. So first you start with the shape and kind of shape it first. And then I usually start from the bottom. I'll make the middle one thicker, and then I'll just kind of gradually work up towards the top, going smaller and smaller and smaller. That's one method. And I think that looks really, really graceful. It gives a very nice jewelry look. And then, let's see here, but you can also do, you know, just 1, 2 like that. And then you can even add just a few little dots on the outside. So it doesn't have to be totally following one another, but you can make it, you know, little clusters here. You can do kind of a gradual movement of dots. And these are definitely straightforward for the most part, but I think these always add a lot of grace to your designs. And oh yeah, no, roses are coming next, so I definitely got some more stuff for you guys. I didn't realize that it would, well, I wasn't sure how long it was gonna take because I'm trying to answer questions and stuff too. But okay, so there is that. And so these ones we kind of went over a little bit, so these I'm just gonna skip that so we can move on. But okay, so also if you're running out of paper like myself, I'm gonna kind of switch over. So this is the hand that I made in the last video, which definitely comes in handy, no pun intended. All right, so let's see. So this is what I consider kind of like a flower building, how to kind of get the perfect flower. And what I'm kind of wondering is if I should move my camera to make it horizontal. Because when I was trying to do the live, it was telling me to do a portrait. So I don't know. I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try it. Let me see if it's the right direction. Let me see here. Again, like I said, my live's in the other, oh, I see. Okay, so it can't really show as a full screen. Yeah, I think that'll be more challenging, actually. Sorry. Thank you guys so much for bearing with me. Oh, tell me, do you like it more like how it was horizontal, or is this better? Let's see, I know there's a lag in between me asking a question and you guys answering, so no worries there. But, okay, so this is kind of like your standard flower, and I just kind of want to go over this first. This is better. Wait, when you say this is better, the other way or how it is now? Sorry, like I said, my first live, and the next one, trust, will be much better. This way. Okay, so here it is. I know I thought it would show up as horizontal too, but it didn't do full screen. I don't know why it's not translating, but okay. Moving on. Here we go. So I'm gonna start with a dot first, and then like we did that swirl. So that's why I kind of wanted to go over those drills first, because they definitely form the basis of many other designs. And then we're gonna move on to here, and then I'm gonna show you how you can create some guidelines in order to create the perfect circle, or not circle, flower. All right, so first things first, I'm gonna do this in the center of the hand, and you can start with a dot first. Just make sure you can use the pointer finger or the middle finger as a guide to where the center is, and then you can go outwards like that. This is kind of the opposite way you can kind of do it first, but I wanted to show you how you can start with the dot first just to get the placement correct. I'm gonna save the direct. If you're talking about these, I'm going to include a link in the description after this video so you can download these and you can use them however many times you want. All right, so now we're gonna add what I like to call the scallops, and those are these little guys. So these can sometimes be a little challenging to get perfect every time, so that comes with practice. But if you're having some difficulty, what you can do is you can create guidelines for this as well. So you can very lightly trace so you know where the scallops top will land. So you have that as a guideline, and then you can gradually work like that. So that way you're not making one taller than the other, but you're following that guideline that you created. And that is very useful. All right, so once you have that, not sure how fast everyone is or not, but I'll give some time so you guys can get on the same point. And let's see. All right, so now I'm gonna create guidelines, and the easiest way to do that is to start by lightly tracing the middle point first, and then go directly across. And then from here, you can kind of eyeball where diagonal is, like that. So you start, it's kind of like the four corners of the world right there. How to find the center of the hand. Oh yeah, so this, again, like I said, the center of the hand, if you take the middle finger, just go, I usually just take the tip of my cone and I go down, and that's why I said if you can start with the dot, kind of place it where you want it. So I usually use the middle finger to guide like that. And then, so once you have the four corners kind of etched in very ever so lightly, now you're going to go directly across. So using the center as that guide, you're gonna go directly in the middle and just kind of lightly trace a little line like that. So now you have the perfect setup for your petals. For the most part, I will just kind of eyeball the petals one by one. Sometimes you end up with the last one a little bit smaller or bigger than you wanted. So this way, if you have the time, you can set it up like this. Let's see. And then so here, if you guys don't have the sheet of paper, I'm gonna be doing petals that are kind of like this S curve on the top. So there's a little indent here. So what you can do first is you can do one line and then one line. So you can kind of make sure that it's the right height on each side. And then you can actually just trace out the curve first, and then you can make it thicker on the edge like that, because if you go thick, it's a little bit easier to do thinner first, and then you can thicken it up at the end. So, and then from here, you can do another line like that, and then you can go thick first at least, if you want to try it, or like I said, you can just kind of lightly trace it first. That can be a little bit easier. You can go a little bit slower, and then you can thicken it up at the end like that. So just do this all the way around. And then eventually, once you have this down, you'll be able to do it super fast. And this is actually how I normally do it. So I'll just kind of go up, and then I'll go from one side to the other, and then one side to the other. So once you have the thin and thick concept down and mastered, you won't have to kind of trace first and then thicken it up. You'll be able to do it on the spot. All right. Oh, I'm so glad that you guys are watching together. Yeah, actually, this is kind of a cool thing that you can do, yeah, with your children. It's kind of like an art class, because I know most kids aren't in school for the rest of the year, which I wish I was a kid growing up during this time. That would have been pretty cool. But I digress. Anyhow, trying to keep things positive. Let's see, the 3 curves on the petals, if that makes sense. Oh yeah, I think you're probably talking like 1, 2, 3. Those are definitely my favorite too, but I think this is kind of good to start. And then there's so many varieties. Actually, did I don't think I printed that out. Maybe that'll be another class, is going over many different variations of flowers, because I got a ton for sure. Let's see. Okay, yes, yeah, I figured that was the one. All right, so now once you have this kind of set up, let's see, now we're going to move on to the sky. So you can kind of see here, you're kind of creating a thicker edge on the inside. So you're kind of outlining it, and then the tricky part is going to be, because it's so small on the inside, you're outlining, it's more like an inline per se. So you're inlining each petal, and the tricky part is making the top thin as possible. So I consider it's kind of like a flick of the wrist. So I'm using pressure, and then at the very end I just kind of flick, and then that creates a nice little, how would you call this? Just a very sharp line at the center. So once I do the flick, I'm not using any pressure anymore. So I'm kind of lifting off, and then the tip kind of guides the point. And so once you do that, set that all up inside your flower, you're ready to move on to the shading. And I hope this is definitely making sense for you guys. I'm trying to explain things how my Piscean mind kind of understands them. So yeah, hopefully this is making sense. All right, so now for the shading part. Shading is tapered line, exactly. That is exactly it. All right, so now for the shading, this part, you're basically gonna be using very little pressure from the bottom. So you could potentially use the henna here to kind of create lines, but you wanna use a little bit of pressure, and then you can just create the shading ever so lightly. So it's a very refined kind of pressure that you're using. And again, the flick of the wrist is really gonna help you create those tapered lines. Yes, Jessica. All right, creating the shading. This part takes some practice. So let's see there. Awesome. So you can really start to see, I'll maybe move this up. you can really see the difference in color. A lot of times when I do this at parties and stuff, people are asking, oh, is that like a different color? You know, if they just walk by and they see me working like a flower. Yeah, a lot of people think that I'm using something different when I'm doing shading, and that's kind of the cool part of henna, is that you can create those different values by using very, very thin pressure contrasted to like the thick pressure, and that definitely shows up in the stain too. I've been doing it for 7 years, which is kind of crazy to say. It's been that long. But I'm glad you think it is going good. I'm having fun. Hope you guys are too. All right, so now the easy part is adding a nice luscious dot right in the center there. And that just, I think, makes it look super clean and fun. White space and composition. So, let's see. That is definitely comes with time. In the beginning, I thought doing a freestyle piece was like, what? How the heck am I gonna do something? Like, I need to look at something. But once you practice so much, and usually a lot of times you're looking at different artists, getting inspiration. A lot of times in the beginning, you are kind of copying designs, not necessarily. You shouldn't, of course, say that it's your own design. You, of course, should give credit to the person. But then once you do that for so long in the beginning, you start to kind of veer off and start doing your own things through your practice. You'll kind of learn how you can kind of take something and make it a little bit different, which makes it your own. And I think art has always been like that. You've always had, you know, artists since time immemorial have had, you know, their mentors or their inspirations, and you can kind of see glimmers of it in their work, but their work is still very much their own, if that makes sense. And as far as white space goes, I'm definitely one to think like more is less versus less is more. But I would say utilizing bands, you know, and making sure that there's space in between, or like the temple shapes are really easy to make sure that you are utilizing enough white space. Sorry, my little watch made me trip up right there. But anyhow, that might be a whole nother class, I think, because I still got a lot of stuff I want to go over. Let's see, so I'm gonna answer that next question soon, but first let's do some swirls. So kind of how we did the opposite corners, or the 4 corners, we're gonna do it kind of opposite. So you can kind of sketch out a line here and a line there so that you can make your swirls perfectly equidistant from each other. So, and like we practiced in the beginning with the drills, kind of do 1 swirl, and then I'm just going to kind of follow along. I like to work from left to right usually when I'm working something circular like this. Let's see. And then from there, then you can add your tapered lines. But they're not necessarily lines so much now, they're a little bit, they're curving. You're following the curve of the swirl very naturally with a subtle taper at the end. Let's see. And so that's one way that you can kind of incorporate negative space, is making sure that everything's kind of symmetrical. Then you kind of have this patch, this, and these areas of negative space. And instead of doing more swirls, which would make it, because you could do that for sure if you wanted to go more for a full look, is you could literally do this design all the way around and then it would look kind of like a mandala. But instead, I am going to leave some room by utilizing these little motifs, these little circles with dots, and these little cluster circles, or cluster dots. And I'm just going to, same way, you're just going to add it equally in the middle. And so I think this is definitely, you know, I would say this kind of has a lot of white negative space in there. So first do the circles, because that's your thicker element, and that's your more, how do you say, it's a little bit of a thicker design. So then you can use those small dot clusters to just fill in any gaps. because to me this is still just a little bit too simple. So I think by adding little clusters of dots, you're still maintaining some negative spacing, but I think it gives it a uniform look. And these little cluster dots I do use a lot of time just to fill in any place in a design that feels a little bit too empty. It's a great way to just kind of add some spice. All right. Yes, a separate class for composition and white space, and freehanding for artists who don't want to copy people. That would be a whole nother class on its own. So that is a great idea. But now moving back to what made me want to start. Is there anyone that helped you along the way? So I had henna done for the first time for my wedding. That was my first experience with it, and I loved it. And then a couple months after I got married, we went to India, and I saw a henna cone in the store, and I just kind of picked it up. It was definitely not a good cone, as far as it was those yucky ready-made cones that you don't want to be using, which I found out once I got home. But I used that in the beginning to practice a lot, and I just fell in love with it because I was doing cake decorating beforehand. So I hated baking, but I loved decorating. So henna was like the best. And as far as I would say I've always been very introverted. So I had been doing henna probably for about 3 or 4 years. Wait, I think I started in March of 2013, so it's been 7 years. And my first henna conference where I actually met like I think another henna artist was in 2017. So that was like 4 years. So I would say just the online community, like Henna Hub and things like that. I definitely got a lot of inspiration from, people like, Sarah Henna and Victoria Welch. And I remember Heartfire Henna was definitely one of my favorite artists when I first started. And I don't know, I think she's still doing it. I'm not really too sure, but in the beginning it was like her, and Maple Mendy too those were like my inspirations in the beginning. And, like I said, the Facebook groups, Henna Hub, and I think there was another one, Henna Gathering too. Those were very helpful in the beginning. Tons of super knowledgeable people that have been doing it for super, super long, so I highly recommend it. And yeah, how to make smaller petals. Let's see. I think these are pretty small, but for example, let's see, you start with the center like that. I usually like to add at least 1 layer of scallops, but sometimes you can add 2. And let's see here. You can do small ones like that. But again, if you want to set it up where you have it equal, you can just kind of make sure you use your guidelines first. But you could also break it down even more, I do suppose. Though I think this amount of petals around a center is usually good enough. Let's see. Used to get hennas from me at Seaport Village, because that's definitely where I started and where I've been for the longest. If so, that would be so awesome that you're watching. How long is this henna class going for? I have no idea. I'm honestly just going with the flow. You guys let me know if you're getting tired. And then maybe real quick, because let's see, what time is it? Let's see, well, it's been about an hour. I was probably estimating around an hour and a half. So let's see, we can move on. Let me ask you guys. So we have the Lotus Flower. We also have the Peony, which is something that always gets requested from me all the time on how I make it. And then we also have kind of like this rose. And then we also have kind of like a hand design building. So you guys let me know if there's a consensus of, okay, we got peony, rose, or hand design. Or lotus, yes, lotus. Okay, That was the one I was gonna do next. Hand design building peony. Okay, okay, we got 2 for Lotus, 2 for Peony. Well, I guess it's both. Ooh, peonies. Okay. Peonies. Okay, Lotus. Oh dang. There. Okay, we're just gonna try to go over it. Okay, I think I'm gonna go with my original plan. So let's do the Lotus first because I think that's easy, a little bit easier, and then we can kind of move on from there. All right, so I am going to just use this side of my hand. All right, so I always start with the left side first, so I'm creating the middle petal. So I start with the middle petal. And so it's basically a C curve, a very gradual C curve, and I start left to right, and then I usually create the bottom, so because it's not just directly up, you kind of have a little bit of a bottom part too, the base of the lotus, and then from there, from left to right, you just meet it up at the point. And so it's very much like a teardrop, like that. All right, good. I'm okay with the 3-hour class, to be honest. Okay, cool. Because honestly, I had no idea how long it was gonna go because I knew there was gonna be questions, but okay. So we got the base of the lotus, and then we're going to start with the left-hand side. And so this C curve, it's the same shape, but it's definitely branching out. So you wanna make sure there's some gradual space in between. And then, so before I connect it, you can just do the other side first. And one side, again, is gonna be a little bit more challenging than the other. As you can see, my right-hand side is more so. And then with another gradual C curve, you don't wanna just, you could just go directly down, but I think it looks a little bit better if it's more of a gradual drop. It looks a little bit more lotus-like. And then you have that. And I'm gonna add another layer. So again, it's the same gradual C curve. And then usually from here on out, it's gonna go shorter and shorter. You could have them all the same height, but I think it looks a little bit better too. Connect it down, connect it down. You can also go up from here, and without even stopping, you can go down like that. A lot of times, that's usually how I'll do it out at my booth, because you don't have as much time, it's just a gradual flow. Okay, so usually I do 7 petals, so the main one first, and then 3 on the edge. And then from the base, you're working down, and this one's a lot shorter. It's definitely not gonna be as long. And then this one has more of a point, like that. It's definitely, the petal is kind of shrunken down, and then so the point is definitely narrower. So once you have that done, that's usually how I do the base. You can kind of see it's almost like a heart too, if I can kind of describe it a little bit better. And then from here, you're gonna wanna make sure that this space is all filled in. So another gradual C curve down. You can kind of see like that. So it almost looks like this is like this is a bird and these are wings coming out. But when you connect it, now we're going to do a gradual C curve the opposite direction. And usually I'll make it to, it's a little bit more curved. So you can kind of see how this sharpness is a lot different looking than this, because you're looking at it more from the side view, if that makes sense. So the shape is definitely different. Let's see. I don't know who the EP is. Yeah, that's interesting. And a message is being held for review, which means it's probably it's probably a troll. Anyhow. All right, so we got that. So once you have that done, then I'm going to add in the shading. So I usually work from the bottom to the top. So we got, again, it's that gradual flick of the wrist. And then from here, I usually do one line first, which is a little bit thicker. Because if you ever look at lotuses, they definitely have this interesting curve. Like if you're looking at the heel of my hand from the side, there's definitely kind of like a shadow created from the natural roundness and curve here. So in order to signify that, I do a thicker line, kind of inlining the petal. And I'll do that for all of them first. And sometimes if you don't have a lot of space, it can be a little bit hard. And then once you have those thicker lines, I'll do some thinner ones just to kind of create this look of shading. And you might not be able to add too many on those last ones. And then before I move on to the shadowing the top of the lotus, I'm going to create that thick inline curve for these bottom ones. So 2 on the center, and then just 1 on these outer 2. And then I usually go to the top and I'll create a little bit of shading on the points. There we go. Just a little bit on these other ones. And then here, you can do the same thing for the bottom petals. So I think having a lotus in your arsenal is very helpful, especially if you're going to be doing festivals and things like that, parties. These are always a hit or a classic. And I just want to show you real quick how those drills that we did in the beginning, you can easily dress up a simple lotus like this. So like that first one, you have the swirl, and then a swirl, and then you can go vine and leaf, 1 and 2, and then you can create like that. And then another thing I like to do is add those chains that we did to the bottom. So a lot of times I'll do like a layered chain like that and add the dots there. And yes, I'm definitely going to be saving this live, so if it's like super late for you and you want to go to bed, do not worry. It will be there in the morning, and I'm just super glad that you guys came, any of you. And again, you can add those little petals and the swirls that we practiced too. So you have the swirl. So that's why I wanted to start with those drills, so you can see how you can easily use those in a myriad different ways to create more complex looking designs. I know, dude, the chains are the best. Like I said, I use them all the time. They're seriously like my go-tos. So that is the lotus, and I'm glad that we can get through that one rather quickly. So now the peony, which so many of you guys are also excited to practice, and adjust just a little bit. So I'm running out of space, so I'm going to use just this empty part right here. All right, so this one is definitely a little bit more complicated. So definitely check the link after this video so that you can get this sent to you as a PDF. All right, so first we're gonna start with this petal. All right, so peonies, this is definitely a more simplified version. They can look super realistic, especially if you follow like people like Veronica Lilu or any Russian henna artists. They do very, very good, very realistic. But I think this is a little bit more tangible if you're just kind of starting out. And I still think it looks good. And you guys are too sweet. All right, so let's see. Number 1. So we're gonna start with that base first petal that you see. And it's definitely, they're a little bit more jagged. So let's see. So it has some indents. So peonies always kind of have more of those little ruffled indents on them. Yes, the ones from the store are not gonna be as good as like handmade henna. So I'm not sure where you're tuning in from. If you're in the US, I do ship cones, and if you're not in the US, Maybe I'll have to put a link, but Henna by Amelia has a story highlight of suppliers all over the world, so I'll add that. Let's see. Okay, so now we're gonna start with kind of like how the lotus, you know, the flowers generally kind of unbranch from each other around like a center. And so these ones you're going to do, it's like a C curve, but you want to make sure you're adding indents. So it doesn't have to be perfect. That's the cool thing about peonies, is the more imperfect the petals are, kind of the more realistic it almost looks. Let's see, we'll do the other side. And you can do top to bottom too, so it doesn't have to be, you know, I usually start from the top, from the left side, but then usually for peonies, then I'll start at the top and then create the petal going like that. And I'm glad you guys think I'm nice. I'm just glad that you guys don't think that you guys weren't super bored, because that was my fear, was that, you know, people were gonna tune in and then just like tune out, like, see ya. So I'm glad you guys are having fun. I definitely am. You're from the US, but got cones from Pakistan. Yes, so usually those ones, like I first started out using cones from like an Indian grocery store, and yeah, the texture is just not gonna be good. And if you're probably joining, but in the beginning, I was mentioning how good paste definitely equals good design. If you have really bad paste, your designs aren't gonna look as flawless as they could. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that it's not boring. And I'm just so glad that there's so many of you guys are here. But okay, so now we're moving on to the bottom part. So usually the peonies have kind of these smaller petals coming out from underneath. So we're gonna start going like that. Again, the more jaggedy, the better. And then at the top, so that's the thing with peonies, is from the top, you'll kind of notice they tend to start to fold over. And so in order to create the illusion of that, we're going to be doing first kind of like a gradual S-curve kind of thing. And then you're kind of following it like that. So it almost looks like lips, like the top lips, if you're drawing, you know, human lips basically. So it's a very thick lip, to say the least, but that's kind of what you want to start out with. And then here you can kind of see you're just basically going inwards from there, from the tips, like that and like that. And then usually around this area, I will create little, they're kind of like scallops, but you're not connecting it at the bottom. It's just kind of a gradual maze type of sensation or motion that you're making. Kind of like a jagged motion, like that. Almost like an accordion, I guess, is a better way to put that. It's 1 a.m. in Spain. Oh my goodness. You're having trouble falling asleep. So well, I'm glad to be of service then, because let's see, what time is it? It is 6:19 p.m. here, and yeah, usually I'm not, I don't know, I go to bed usually pretty early, so, but this isn't too late, which is good, but I know for some of you guys it is. And let's see, okay, so now we're moving on. So you can kind of see there's kind of space here and here, and let's see, and then also here. So I usually would recommend to start from the bottom here and then create another petal. So it's almost like it has little wings. And then again, you're just gonna do the same thing, but a little bit bigger. And let's see, from here, a little bit bigger. So now you can see there's definitely a gap at the top. And so you're gonna fill that in with another petal. And kind of a little bit more gradual. Let's see. Oh yeah, definitely I think I know who you're talking about. The Jagwa artists. Was it Hen Drawn, I think, is their Instagram? Yeah, they're pretty amazing, for sure. And And with Jagua too, because I think the henna paste is a lot easier to work with than Jagua. So that's very impressive. All right. I think she does workshops too, so if you're ever in Singapore, I'm sure you guys can take some workshops from her. That would maybe one day. And okay, so now again, with those, like kind of how we did here, you can actually create that just by kind of gradually falling along on the inside. You're aligning the inside of the petal, kind of creating some jaggedness. And then we're gonna move on, so now we're flowing a little bit more outwards, opening up the peony. So from here, I usually start from these two here, kind of just a little ways up, because usually the petals aren't usually one behind another, they're a little bit overlapping. So that's basically what I'm trying to do is overlap petal to petal. And then let's see, then here we're just kind of filling in the gaps. So there's going to be some smaller petals and some larger ones. The peony is definitely very diverse in that sense. And let's see, so this is kind of where we are right now, but I kind of feel that's a cool thing about, you know, doing hennas, you can always adapt it. So if there looks like there's a little bit of extra space here, like I think there is here, you can actually create even another petal. So it doesn't have to be perfect. And then now we're gonna move on to the shading. So usually I like to do the shading from the little indents that we made in the petals. So from the indent, I'll do like 1 or 2 little lines like that. And that creates that sensation that the petal is ruffled. And that's kind of the look of the peonies. And you can do a little bit from the top, even a little bit from the bottom. But you do want to have some white space, I think, kind of making it a little bit balanced as far as you don't have like a lot of shading, though you could. I think it looks good if you space it out just a little bit. So I usually do the top first. And usually you can kind of make it to where the shading is moving towards the center. So it's not just going straight down, but rather you kind of following the flow of the petal, the shape of the outside of the petal. And then usually those ones that are curved on the top, you just create a little bit of shading underneath, but you can also create a little bit from the center too. You can just add. So what I'm doing right now is with very light pressure, just kind of etching in some shading on the bottom, and that just kind of creates a nice little contrast. And then again from the top and then from the bottom, you can add 1 or 2 here and there. That's the great thing again about peonies. They don't have to be exactly perfect. And just creating a little bit more. I know the peonies, they look challenging. I should be doing more of that very, very hyper realistic. I'll try to do maybe a video on that as well at some point. But I think this is kind of like a go-to because it looks really good with, you know, traditional style henna. You know, a lot of brides really like the peonies nowadays too. So that's always fun to kind of have. It's kind of like a fusion of like a henna style flower and the more realistic looking peony. And again, kind of making those curved shading lines from top and then a little bit on the bottom, kind of overlapping as well. So not usually directly right underneath each other. And so that is a peony, a very simple and easy one. And again, I'll show you another variation that you can kind of do with those chains, is you can drape a circle coming out, and a lot of times I'll do it overlapping. So one circle and then another, and then I'll add the dots to create like a little chain effect. And that's really fun. So I feel like I can never just do a flower by itself. I always have to add embellishments. And then you can kind of create little leaves coming from it, like how we practiced in the beginning. Is another thing I usually like to add to it. Usually in clusters of either 5 or 7 usually. So you can do 1 and another one like that. Like that. I think that looks really good with it. The most requested design. Let's see. So that it can kind of vary according to the day, to be quite honest. Some days, like out at my booth, lotuses are always popular for sure. I always do a lotus here and there. The peony style, because I have it now in my books, people do like it a lot. But I wouldn't say that any one design is requested like all the time. Like I don't know, I think because I do so much different things that everything kind of seems equally requested, if that makes sense. There's just so much variety and there's so many different people who like different things. I'll have to, that actually might be a good video, is going through my design books and showing you like all the ones that get requested all the time. Because I have some designs in my design books that I've had for probably like 4 or 5 years that I keep in my book just because I know people like them all the time. Like they're just, I call them my classics. So that's actually a good topic. Yeah, just kind of creating some, you know, designs on the outside of it. Something like that could look really awesome on a shoulder, on a thigh, or anything, something like that. You can definitely do it on the hand too. You just have to make it a little bit smaller. All right, so I think before we do like a hand design, similar is like a rose, kind of like a basic, kind of standard rose, but, well, hold on one second. I'm just gonna peel that off real quick just to make some more room. So you can definitely do roses that are super hyper realistic, but I think just for the purpose of this video, I wanted to show you this one, which is kind of like a fusion, not super realistic, but not just like your standard henna flower. All right, so I think I might do it like this. So we're gonna start with the center of the rose, which is basically just a standard swirl. Let me just make sure that's clean. And so some of you guys that are using smaller henna cones, I wonder if you guys are having to use another cone yet, or if you're still on the first one. I still have quite a lot in this one. It was probably like a 30-gram cone. The ones I sell on my site are like, the large one's actually 25, so sometimes I'll use them even bigger. Usually if it's a size like this, honestly, if I'm doing a bride, say from the fingers to the elbow and then the feet to maybe like halfway up the legs, I'm probably only using about 4 cones, the big ones. So that's about 60, that's like 120 grams worth of paste for all of that. Yeah, my math is not the best, but just to give you an idea, you can do quite a lot with one large cone. All right, so at the center, so with roses, they usually branch out in leaves in odd numbers. So I'm gonna create a group of 3 around it. So, and usually these are gonna be like half ovals, especially in the beginning. The rose is, you know, the petals are just very, you know, like that, concentrically centered around it. And then once they start blooming outwards, then you get some of the divots in the petals. But in the center, usually they're pretty symmetrical. So I'm gonna do another group of 3, but these ones are gonna have a little bit of an indent in them, if that makes sense. And what's cool about roses too, like the peony, it doesn't have to be perfect. Each petal can be a little bit different versus like your standard henna flower, which usually, you know, you want them to be perfectly symmetrical. All right, so now we're gonna start by doing a group of 5. So we're gonna start with 1, and they're always kind of overlapping. So instead of doing 1 starting from here and going out like that, I'm going to overlap it. And again, a lot of times they have these little divots in the petals, like that. And a lot of times I'll go from the other side, and then I'll group it together, kind of overlap, like that. So now that's with the group of 5. Now we're gonna do another group of 5. So they're always a little bit bigger, a little bit longer in length, if you will. Like that. Looking good. You kind of see how they extend a little bit longer. And I usually do them a little bit more concave, especially the outer ones. So now we're gonna add some leaves. So these are very rose style leaves. Doesn't really matter which side you do it on. It would matter a little bit more if you're working on a part of the body. This leaf to kind of maybe go towards the middle finger, and then these ones maybe on the side. And then so now I'm going to create a cluster of 2 petal or leaves rather. Oops, it's a little bit cut off. There we go. All right. Perfect. And then we'll start. Usually I'll create 2 lines in the center linking up to the tip of the leaf. Perfect. And then in order to create the vine or the veins, I usually start from the outer edge of the leaf, and then I'll kind of create, it's almost like that teardrop that we were practicing, except it's not so much, so thick on the top, but it is a little bit thicker. I usually make the outer edge thicker and then gradually taper into the center vein. Just gradually. And it's definitely very curved. You're kind of curving towards the base of the leaf, if that makes sense. You just do it on each side for each of the leaves. Hopefully this is good. This is fairly an easier part of the process. So once you have your leaves done, one thing you can also do too is once you lay down those lines, you can actually make that center line just a little bit thicker, and that kind of creates a really clean looking leaf. Perfect. All right, so there is your rose before shading and little motifs, decorations that we're gonna add too. All right, so same thing with the peony. You're going to, usually for the rose, I like to work from the bottom, just kind of creating some shading, creating some really thin lines, flicking that wrist. But roses are a really good opportunity to practice the other style of shading, where you're kind of using the tip of your cone almost like a smudge stick. Like if any of you have tried sketching, they have like those little smudge sticks. They're like white paper, and once you lay down pencil line, you kind of smudge it, and it just kind of creates a really nice gradient to create shading. So you can do that same thing, that same concept with the tip of your cone using really, really light pressure. And then you can kind of create a really nice contrast in the petal, which gives it a very realistic look too. So shading is definitely one of the things you want to be able to master when you're learning henna. Just kind of gives your designs that extra edge. So it's just a very, very continuous motion. And then once you have that shading, you can even, without any pressure, when you're trying to make that gradient from the base to the top, without any pressure, you can actually smudge up a little bit more into the top of that petal. And that creates an even more of a gradual transition. Let's see, the most popular henna design. That's so hard per se, because like I said, I have very many, like I have a lot of designs in my book, my design at my booth, and some days one of them will get requested like a lot, especially like in the summer, and whereas one won't. But then on another day, the one that never got requested will get requested like all the time. So they kind of switch off back and forth. It kind of depends on the day. But flowers are very popular. Lotuses, roses. I have something like this that we're doing right now in my design book, and it's definitely a popular one for sure. And if you're talking different demographics too, so you have your kids, love unicorns. I have a narwhal that's like super popular. But when you're talking more like adults, usually a lot of times they'll like a simple, floral and paisley design from like the wrist to the finger. But for the most part of my booth, I really try to encourage artist choice at this point in my henna life. I do like to do designs on the spot, so I'll just ask them if they want something more floral or less floral. So less floral meaning it'll be more structured, linear, like diamonds and like the temple shapes and whatnot. So it really depends on the day. But once you've got your shaded flower, your rose, now I'm just gonna add some little details. So again, going back to drills that we practiced, any of those would do. And like I said, the basic swirl, getting that down. This is always a perfect accent with those little leaves that follow along the same trajectory as the swirl. And you can just kind of follow it along. Usually I do them right next to the leaves first, and then you'll see how I fill in the gaps after that. So once you add these little swirls with leafy bits, then the areas, again, that kind of look a little empty, like this space right here and this space right here, I'm gonna add kind of little clusters of leaves. But you can add those circle with dots on the outer rim of it like this. You can definitely add little details like that too. And of course we got those cluster of dots that you can do, which look really, really good. I'm glad you like the swirls. Like I said, just if you could take like a week and do it every day in a drill kind of style where you're just doing it over and over again, I guarantee you will get your swirl to be where you want it. It's just one of those things, the more you do it, you develop that muscle memory, and then you can literally do it like in your sleep. Like it becomes super easy, super natural. But in the beginning, trust me, like, let me see if I can show you. Oh man. Maybe I'll try to recreate what they used to look like. Like they're definitely more like maybe like that. And then if I tried to do something like that, it was probably more like this or something like that. That definitely looks more like probably what they first looked like. Or maybe it was like kind of maybe just all one line weight. It wasn't a gradual transition from thin to thick. And then these usually were just kind of like little swoopies like that. Like that or something like that. And trust me, like, oh my gosh, I have to find photos for you guys. Maybe I should do, that's actually one video I want to do, was recreating designs from like 2013. So if I can find some, I definitely have some like on Facebook and stuff, recreating them, so showing you what it looked like then and then how I would do it now. So definitely, even like 3 years ago, clients will come to me like, oh, you did my henna 3 years ago. Like, here's the photo. And I'll look at it. And I know at the time they loved it. But I look at it and I'm like, oh my God, like, like, that was me? Like, I know it was my work, but, you know, I can see, even within like 3, sometimes even 2 years time, your style will develop and you'll definitely refine your skills. So no worries there at all. All right, so we're on the final page. I can't believe it. Let's see, it has been, well, with technical difficulties that we had in the beginning, which probably made me start like 10 minutes late. It's been like an hour and a half, which is not too bad. That's kind of what I was anticipating. So just one more left. I think we're kind of on point. I've been able to answer a lot of your questions, which I'm happy about. Yes. Yeah, so yeah, so I'm glad that you guys can see, and just I always tell people, like, never lose hope or think that you'll never be able to do it, and then how you envision, because when I first started, I would look at a design online and I would think, oh yeah, I could totally do that, you know, like, yeah, that's so easy. And then I would try to do it and I'm like, oh my God, like, it does not look anything like it. So we've all been there before, anyone, like, and we're always constantly evolving and learning, and there's still so many things I would like to improve upon. So that's the great thing about it. It's a never-ending journey. All right, so using basically everything that we kind of went over, we're gonna create kind of like your standard henna design. And then like something like this is very, very, very popular at my booth for sure. I think this is, and when people are asking like what's the most popular design, something like this is very typical, is a very, you know, like all around, most people will like it. So to start, we're gonna do a flower. And when you're starting a hand design, you kind of want to make sure that, I think maybe, let me just make sure, okay, because I know that it's white on white, but it's definitely a different white. Anyhow, so you want to make sure to know the trajectory of the design, you know, you want to know, are you going to the pointer finger, are you going to here, are you going to do something more symmetrical going towards here? That's usually what I determine first, especially if I'm going to do a freestyle. Is the more desi looking. Exactly. This is like very like Sangeet, you know, this is stuff like that I do for fast bridal parties all the time. But so that's usually what I'll determine before I start. Say if I ask someone, do you want something floral or structured? They say they like flowers. I'll just, you know, ask them, you know, do you prefer like where it goes? So this one we're going to be going towards the pointer fingers. So we're going to start, I always start farthest away and then work towards myself. So we're going to start at the corner of the hand right here, and we're going to work diagonal. The practice pages, okay, so you're talking about these, right? So I'm going to list a link on the description after this video. I'm going to edit the link, and then it'll take you to sign up. So you sign up with your email, and then I'll send an email with the PDFs for all of these, so you can use these and practice over and over again. But okay, and don't worry if you missed the class, I'm going to be posting this after. So, all right, so now we're starting diagonal. So we're gonna start with a flower. So again, starting with the center like so, add your scallops. And once you have that, then we're gonna move on to the petals. All right. There we go. And again, you can use the method where you use the guidelines. But if you can learn how to just be able to wing it, that would be, I think, the most ideal. And then we're going to create the shading just by creating gradual tapered lines using very, very little pressure. And I start from the base of the petal and then work upwards. And with the flick of the wrist, you're going to create that shading. So we went over this a lot, but if there's anyone new joining, just kind of going over it. Can you add more Desi design in the link to if you have them? I'll have to see, just because I don't know if I have them in PDF like this, but I am working on an ebook so that you'll be able to download. I want to have an ebook of all just like party Sandkeep designs. I do have some actually. I probably do have some. I'll have to see. But yeah, I'm working on a collection so that, you know, you can download and then have them all like that. So again, back to this flower. Once you have the flower, we're going to add just some dots in the center of the petals. And then, like I said, usually I'm working farther away from myself and then working towards the fingers. So here we're gonna add a swirl with those leaves. And what's cool about them, you can make them as short or as long as you want. You just kind of want to try to work on the trajectory being very symmetrical and even. And usually the tip is flowing towards the direction that the leaf is going. All right, so now we haven't done any paisleys yet, only in the beginning when we did that first practice drill. But so the S curve, and I'm gonna stop before doing the tip because this is my favorite kind of paisley. So you do the gradual S curve with a very sharp tip, and then you're gonna connect it with a C curve going from this part of the flower and then connecting it to the neck right here. And then from here, wait, how do you go to the bathroom without smudging anything on the body? That will depend. So if you are doing a hand design, then, you know, I always tell people to do their left hand so then they can go to the bathroom, and usually you can get by using one hand. If you're a bride, then that's gonna be difficult. You're gonna wanna wait till it dries or have your mom help you. But okay, so now for this paisley, what I like to do is drape, and you're following that C curve, and then you're gonna create the swirl on the inside. So this is like my very favorite style of paisley. So you can do the paisley like how we practiced before, where you have the neck kind of curving into a swirl with a dot in the center. That's a very standard way. But like this is the way that I'm doing and showing you for this design. It's just something elegant about the very thin outer edge with the thickness of this part right here. So once you have that, usually I'll interline this part of the paisley, because that's one thing you want to make sure in your work is that you're varying thick and thin lines. So you don't want to always do the same line weight. You always want to make sure you're doing kind of like sandwiching, thick and thin. So now I'm going to create a little teardrop going towards the top of this paisley. And then with a curved line, I'm going to be tracing that teardrop. Then I'm adding scallops, which I usually do these kind of baby ones first. And then can the live be saved or not? Yes, I'm going to I'm going to post the live, so don't worry. All right, so then there's that. And then I'm going to do these thicker scallops and then do a thick outlining and then a thin outlining. Because like I said, you want to do thick and thin. Then we're going to outline this bottom part of the paisley with those vines that we've been practicing. So there is that part. And now we're going to be working gradually towards here. So what we're going to be doing next is now we're going to add these vines a little bit longer and thinner on the other side of the paisley. There you go, like that. And then, let's see. So that's kind of the cool thing about henna too. Like this is just a guide or a framework. Mine's kind of going a little bit more towards thumb. So what you can actually do here, what I would do if this was like a client or someone, as I would create a swirl on the outside of here, like that. And then I would do this flower that was gonna go just right here. I'm gonna do it right here. And then we'll fill in the gap there. So that's the cool thing, and why you should definitely practice freestyle with, you know, if you have like a hand like this, or I'm also gonna send the PDF if you haven't already received it in my newsletter. I have a PDF of a hand like I was working on before that you can print out, and then you can practice on this too. Which if you watch the video that I just posted recently, it shows you how I made this hand that you can practice on. All right, and then so now that we have that, you're gonna create your petals again. And so a lot of times in order to create designs that look very, you know, clean and neat, you wanna use like repeating patterns. So I'm using the same shape of petal that I used in the beginning. So that kind of creates continuity in your designs. And then we're gonna create the shading in the petals again, and using like similar shading techniques in the flowers as well. We'll create that continuity. Then we'll add your dots. And then one reason why I like to have, you know, students practice these little drills too, is that once you have these down, you can place them anywhere. So now that we have this gap here, I'm just gonna add little clusters of these leaves, just kind of going off like so. And then you can add some dots here, and then you can add some dots there, which also kind of creates continuity. And then, let's see, now we're gonna create some swirls going up the finger. So you can do it in any direction. So I'm gonna going towards that side, going towards the left side. And then one cool variation of the teardrop is you can kind of create like a long version. So instead of like a short version, it's extending over top this swirl that we just did. And then from here, we're gonna create another longer extended swirl. So once you get the concept of a swirl or a teardrop down, you can create varieties by elongating it, curving it in different directions. Really, the sky's the limit. And then I'm gonna create more little leaves here. And I didn't even add that in here, but on here, I think it looks good. So that's what will happen when, even if you get like an ebook with designs and you're practicing them, you're still able to kind of make it your own and put little details that weren't there before. And that's how you kind of learn what looks good, how to practice to create your own designs in the future. And now we're gonna create, usually the swirls, I like to have them go in opposite directions as I work up. So we had one go towards the left side and the right side, and then vice versa. I'm gonna create that like that. And learning how to do dots that kind of flow in that same direction as well looks really good. And you can add that even to the bottom, which is another place I like to add these little chain of dots. So, and usually doing thicker ones and then curving into very, very thin ones. And then now there's definitely some spaces to me that seem pretty empty. So I'm just gonna add some dot clusters. Again, you could even do the circle with the dots like that. And again, this just kind of livens it up. And I'll show you again another way that I like to use those chains. Very similar. You can do one circle and another. And this is a very, very typical design that I do at parties, like bridal parties, or even just, you know, event parties and whatnot. This is definitely a classic look. And so here I think I could use a couple little dots, as well as here and here. And then there you have a nice flow, a very simple but elegant still kind of hand design. And I think that is pretty good. I think I went over pretty much everything that I wanted to, so. And it's been about almost 2 hours, so I don't know if you guys have any questions. It would be kind of cool if it was like a group chat type of thing where, you know, people can show photos of what they're working on from one side. I think there's an app, like a Zoom app or something like that, or Google Hangouts, like if someone's talking, then it shows their picture of what, you know, of what their screen looks like and whatnot. That would be kind of cool maybe in the future, but I think as Instagram Live, this has been pretty fun. Thank you guys so much. I'm so glad that you guys tuned in. I hope it was informative. Hopefully, like I said, you weren't too bored, and I hope you got some good practice in, because I think that's definitely what we can utilize this time for, where we can't really go out, is to enhance our skills, because as I've mentioned before, like this too shall pass. So once it does, you know, you want to have taken advantage of this time, and that's definitely something that we can all do together. So I'm glad that you guys could come. Yes, I'm so happy. I'm so happy that you guys could make it. And if there's any last questions, I'll try to take them and we'll go from there. Because like I said, it's only 7 p.m. here, so it's not too late. Yes, let's see. Honestly, I would have continued the flower like it shows in the photo that you yes, definitely. Yeah, there's so much, you know, you can do with it, which is, this is kind of just basic, like building blocks, getting the foundation, and then the sky's the limit, honestly. But yeah, thank you so much. And if we get stuck, there's still a way. Oh yes, exactly. Yeah, if you are stuck, if you realize like, oh, it went a little bit too far, but you can balance it out by then shifting things with like a swirl, and then you can change the trajectory of the design. Yes, definitely tag me. I definitely want to see. Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you for mentioning that. Jessica, you are chock full of amazing ideas and yes, words. They're like the tapered. That's going to be like my word now, tapering. Anyhow, but yes, definitely tag me so that I can see what you guys created during this class. That would be super amazing if you could do that. And yeah, so I hope to maybe have a live, maybe like once a month. I think I want to even make like a Patreon page where it's then just like really exclusive, and it can be very tailored to what, you know, the patrons want exactly. Because this is just something I kind of created on the spot. I'm like, oh, that would be kind of interesting to go over this, and that. But I would love to create a space that's very much like a close-knit kind of family that's like not necessarily public, so it's a little bit more exclusive. So that might be something you might want to look out for, because I want to set that up real soon. But I tell you some of my progress. Okay, awesome. So since I'm using my phone, I haven't been able to check Instagram, but after this I will. But yeah, so to close up, after I end the session, I'm gonna real quick try to edit the description with all the information and then once you sign up, there's like a sign up page if you put your email, and I'll email you the PDFs for all of these so that you could practice. And then yeah, definitely tag me so I can see what you guys create. And yes, again, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining. Hopefully, like I said, next time I won't have as much difficulty. I'm gonna have to play around with the live, going from events to a live broadcast, because it's kind of a little bit complicated, actually. And, you know, but whereas right now for this, I just clicked live and then it created like its own thing. So I'm still working on that. But yeah, so next time things will be a little bit smoother. But all right, thank you. I'll end it there. Thank you so much, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Yeah.